When an empire feels the earth shifting beneath its feet, it rarely admits its own vulnerability. Instead, it carefully engineers a phantom threat. On the 10th of March, 2026, a deeply unsettling warning echoed from the heavily guarded corridors of Washington. The United States government issued a sudden, alarming statement to the world, claiming that its diplomatic installations and affiliated educational schools in Nigeria were under imminent, severe threat. They urgently called upon their citizens to carefully study their environment before making any movement, painting a terrifying picture of an invisible enemy hiding in the shadows of West Africa. But when you strip away the polished diplomatic language, clear the thick smoke of the daily press briefings, and apply the cold, unforgiving mathematics of geography, the official narrative completely shatters. Stay with us. This is more than a headline. It is a hinge in history. If this story resonates, show your support with a like, a comment, or a subscription. It means more than numbers. It keeps the story alive. The geopolitical machine implicitly pointed its finger at the escalating fiery conflict with Iran, suggesting a dark, sprawling web of Middle Eastern retaliation reaching deep into the African continent. Yet, the physical distance between Tehran and Abuja is exactly 8,149 kilometers. Let that massive number sink in. We are talking about a vast, sprawling ocean of land and sea. In the current theater of war, the ballistic missiles deployed by Iranian forces have a documented, tested operational range that does not exceed 3,000 to 4,000 kilometers. There is absolutely no verifiable military record, no hidden test of a weapon in their current arsenal capable of crossing the 6,000 kilometer mark, let alone flying over 8,000 kilometers to strike a school in Nigeria. The mathematics simply do not add up. If a global superpower is genuinely terrified of Iranian retaliation, they do not look at West Africa. They look directly at the borders of Turkey, where American nuclear weapons are quietly and dangerously stored. They look at their massive, heavily fortified military bases stationed across Germany and the rest of Europe, which sit squarely within striking distance. To completely ignore those obvious immediate vulnerabilities and instead suddenly declare a state of emergency in Nigeria is not an act of defense. It is an act of calculated manipulation. So, if the missiles cannot physically bridge that vast 8,000-kilometer gap, what is the actual justification for this sudden, manufactured panic? Why aggressively sell fear to a domestic population while simultaneously laying the bureaucratic groundwork to expand a permanent foreign military presence in West Africa? The answer, as it always has been throughout the dark chapters of history, is buried deep beneath the soil. It is not about protecting innocent schools. It is not about defending distant diplomatic installations. It is about the harvest. Nigeria is not just another nation on the map. It is a geopolitical crown jewel. It holds the second largest oil reserves on the entire African continent, surpassed only by the tragic, fractured remnants of Libya. And every sovereign citizen of the global south remembers exactly what happened to the peace, the dignity, and the prosperity of Libya when external powers decided to intervene in the name of supposed democratic protection. The foreign policy architects in Washington operate under the Monroe Doctrine when it comes to the Americas, firmly declaring that their hemisphere is entirely off limits to outside powers. Yet, they view the rich, dark soil of Africa, and specifically Nigeria's boundless oil, as an open frontier meant for their exclusive taking. To justify placing their military boots on this sovereign ground, the architects of this modern scramble need a convenient, terrifying pretext. Initially, the international media dramatically claimed that Christian populations were being systematically threatened and persecuted in Nigeria, framing a highly emotional narrative of religious rescue. But the reality on the ground exposes a glaring, undeniable geographic contradiction. The arid, unforgiving regions where the prominent terrorist groups actually operate, are vastly separated from the southern territories where the majority of the Christian populations live. Crucially, those southern territories are exactly where the vast oceans of crude oil are located. The extremists do not govern the oil fields, yet the geopolitical machine uses the tragic chaos of one region to quietly and systematically justify seizing military control of the other. They whisper warnings of Boko Haram, leaning heavily on the group's infamous reputation to terrify the global public. They constantly remind everyone that the very name of the group translates to a violent rejection of Western education, thereby claiming these militants are specifically targeting American-linked schools. But let us look at the brutal, unvarnished facts. These extremist factions routinely attack peaceful local citizens. They continuously ambush Nigerian army positions and destroy the hard-earned livelihoods of the working class. They are a devastating, horrific plague on the local African population, a plague that shatters families and ruins the seasonal harvest. They are not, however, an existential intercontinental threat to an offshore superpower sitting thousands of kilometers away. The resilient people of West Africa, whose calloused hands have built and rebuilt their communities despite decades of engineered instability, are watching this familiar, tragic theater unfold once again. They see the phantom threats being artificially projected onto their homeland. They recognize the old imperial playbook being dusted off and aggressively rewritten for a new century. It is a manufactured crisis designed to construct a permanent, impenetrable fortress over someone else's wealth, stealing the independence of a nation before it can even truly stand. If the supposed apocalyptic threat is not falling from the Middle Eastern sky, and if the local extremists are merely being used as convenient pawns in a much grander, darker game of global resource control, what exactly is the foreign war machine preparing to unleash on the African soil? There is a sinister, highly profitable cycle at play across the continent. Let us call it the mercenary loop. It is a brutal, calculated system designed to manufacture chaos, only to later sell the illusion of stability at an extortionate price. The imperial playbook is devastatingly simple. First, you allow, or actively cultivate, extremist factions to shatter the peace of a sovereign nation. You watch from a safe distance as they burn the harvest, terrorize the working families, and destabilize the local government. Then, when the nation is bleeding and desperate, you arrive not as an equal partner, but as a reluctant savior. You offer to eradicate the very threat that your geopolitical system helped create, but this protection is never free. The cost of this supposed security is paid in lithium, in gold, and in the absolute surrender of national dignity. They openly propose these staggering trades in the broad daylight of global diplomacy. Give us your strategic minerals, hand over the wealth buried deep beneath your ancestral soil, and we will help you fight the terrorists. Yet, any critically thinking mind must ask the fundamental question: who truly benefits from this endless war? Who manufactured these mercenaries? When these militant groups cause catastrophic damage, the foreign powers step in to generously take for free what they were previously supposed to buy. It is an economic stranglehold cleverly disguised as military aid. The working people, the men and women with calloused hands who simply wish to tend their land and reap a peaceful harvest, find themselves caught in the crossfire of a war they did not ask for. They are told that foreign troops are there to bring the light of civilization and build the road to security. Yet, that road only leads wealth out of their country, and the promised light is merely the flash of gunfire in the dark. Consider the tragic events that unfolded just recently on the 8th of March. A devastating attack struck a critical military position inside a national park in Benin. This was not a random, disorganized skirmish. The targeted outpost was located in an incredibly difficult to access area, a place where it is immensely hard to resupply the brave soldiers stationed there. It was a highly calculated strike, leaving the local defenders essentially abandoned in the dense, unforgiving terrain. We offer our deepest condolences to the grieving families in Benin, to those whose loved ones paid the ultimate price for a manufactured war. Benin is a nation bordering Nigeria, bordering Burkina Faso and Niger. By attacking these vital, interconnected borderlands, the architects of chaos are attempting to suffocate the entire region. They are methodically squeezing West Africa, attempting to create a sprawling, unmanageable zone of engineered instability to justify their permanent presence. And what is the role of the foreign press in this ongoing tragedy? It is profoundly disturbing. The mainstream media from Paris and other Western capitals actively tries to hide these defensive defeats when it suits their political narrative, yet simultaneously acts as the de facto communication wing for the very militants they claim to fiercely oppose. Theoretically, in their polished diplomatic speeches, the foreign armies and these extremists are sworn enemies. But on the ground, the reality is entirely different. They do not even try to hide the contradictions anymore. The terrorists boldly claim their primary problem is the foreign military presence, yet they consistently bypass foreign installations to attack peaceful citizens and local army positions. It is a grand, tragic deception. It is a silent partnership designed to keep the continent perpetually dependent on external salvation. The ultimate goal of this machinery has never changed. It is the complete recolonization of the African continent, repackaged for the modern era. They have already established strong footholds in Central Africa, in places like the Congo, the Central African Republic, and Chad. Now, they are aggressively setting their sights on the vast, untapped wealth of West Africa. They look across the landscape and see a continent they believe is permanently divided. They see compromised local politicians who are willing to sign away 85% of their national resources just to maintain a fragile, illusionary grip on power. They hold secretive meetings with these politicians and militant representatives in quiet European cities, desperately trying to orchestrate the downfall of any genuine sovereign movement. They truly believe that the people of Africa are too divided, too weak, and too easily manipulated to ever stand up and claim their rightful independence. Let us take a moment here, not to rush forward, but to give thanks. Write a comment with a simple thank you to Traore, to Burkina Faso, or to the spirit of sovereignty itself. Gratitude is not a formality, it is recognition, it is dignity expressed in words. When you add your voice of thanks, you are not just engaging with a video, you are standing in solidarity with a story of freedom and pride. So, before we continue, take this pause to comment your thank you. Together, those words become a beacon that shines far beyond the screen. The global elite, sitting comfortably in their distant capitals, were absolutely convinced that this mercenary loop would eventually break the spirit of every single African nation. They coldly calculated that under the crushing weight of engineered terrorism and economic extortion, the entire continent would eventually fall to its knees and beg for a return to the old colonial chains. But in their arrogant calculations, they made one fatal, historic misjudgment. They completely failed to account for a sudden, massive awakening. They expected to blow down a fragile house of cards, but instead, they crashed headfirst into an impenetrable wall of solid stone in the very heart of the Sahel. The imperial architects, accustomed to compliant leaders and fragile states, expected their engineered chaos to break the spirit of the continent, but they encountered an immovable object in the very heart of the land. They hit the formidable, unyielding wall of the Alliance of Sahel States, widely known as the AES. While other nations, like Nigeria, find themselves increasingly surrounded by suffocating foreign security offers and manufactured panic, the AES has boldly chosen a radically different path. At the very vanguard of this historic resistance stands Burkina Faso, guided by the unyielding vision of Ibrahim Traore. They have categorically refused to rent out their sovereignty. They do not want foreign mercenaries policing their sovereign borders, and they absolutely reject the establishment of permanent foreign military bases on their ancestral soil. Instead, they have chosen to trust the calloused hands of their own people to protect the harvest and secure their own future. Before we reveal the next chapter, which is perhaps the most powerful assertion of sovereignty you will ever hear, I want to pause and speak directly to you. If this channel has moved you, if these stories are touching something deep in your spirit, then consider becoming a member. Not for exclusive content or perks, but because supporting this channel is directly supporting narratives that mainstream media refuses to tell. Every membership is a vote for Sankara's Echo's mission. Every member becomes a co-creator of the revolution we are documenting. Join us. Stand with the principle that African wealth belongs to Africa. This alliance is not merely a military pact, it is a profound ideological awakening that is shaking the global order to its core. The AES is the major obstacle, the great stone fortress, preventing the old empires from getting their hands on all of Africa. The global elite are genuinely terrified of this movement. They are terrified because if Burkina Faso and its allies succeed in proving that an African nation can thrive, secure itself, and prosper without Western supervision, the entire neo-colonial house of cards immediately collapses. For decades, the dominant, patronizing narrative has been that the continent simply cannot trade or survive without the benevolent guidance of Washington, London, or Paris. The imperial powers swore that Africans had no right to forge their own strategic partnerships, no right to trade freely with the rest of the world on their own terms. The AES completely shatters that arrogant illusion. Under the leadership of Ibrahim Traore and his counterparts, they are practically demonstrating that true independence means controlling your own resources, your gold, your lithium, your uranium, and deciding exactly who gets to sit at the trading table. It means breaking the one-way supply chain that has impoverished the soil while enriching distant capitals. It means looking the empire in the eye and declaring that the era of begging for dignity is permanently over. What happens when a nation asserts this level of uncompromising sovereignty? The empire pushes back with immense fury. They deploy pseudo-diplomats to wage a different kind of war, a war of words and economic sabotage, often wrapped in the hollow, hypocritical language of their famous democracy. According to these imperialists, their specific brand of democracy is the only valid system of governance, arrogantly claiming it descended directly from ancient Athens, as if the ancestors of Africa were somehow Greeks. They conveniently and deliberately ignore the rich, deeply rooted history of African governance. Long before these foreign ships ever cast their shadows on the shores, these lands were well governed. The communities thrived, the justice systems functioned, the harvest was shared equitably, and the people absolutely did not need to throw themselves into the merciless ocean to escape poverty. They were not begging, they were sovereign. The global powers know that true sovereignty is a highly contagious idea. If the AES prevails, the light of independence will rapidly spread across the borders, illuminating the minds of millions. This is precisely why the relentless media campaigns and the meticulously engineered instability are being focused with such intense, desperate fury on the Sahel region. Some political observers and compliant leaders are tragically mistaken in believing that the imperial machine is only after the AES countries. This is a fatal, devastating miscalculation. The empire views the AES as the first necessary domino. If they can crush this fierce spirit of independence here, they firmly believe they can devour the rest of the continent, moving swiftly from the Sahel down to the massive oil reserves of Nigeria and beyond. Once the fortress of the Sahel falls, there will be no one left to defend the remaining wealth. The foreign architects of chaos, realizing that direct military intimidation cannot bend the iron will of the Sahel, have pivoted to a much more insidious weapon, the calculated corruption of the mind. They rely on the tragic hollowing out of sovereignty by those who are supposed to be its guardians. Across the continent, we witness the sad spectacle of pseudo-African diplomats, men and women who look like us but speak with the forked tongue of the empire. They are being dispatched to wage a war on their own brothers in the name of a democracy they do not even control. These individuals are the primary agents of the mercenary loop, signing treaties in quiet European cities that effectively surrender 85% of their national wealth to foreign entities. These leaders gain almost nothing from these pacts. They are merely given enough to keep their own families comfortable while the families of the working class starve. They are convinced that they must go to war against their neighbors to prove their loyalty to a rules-based order that has never once followed its own rules. This is the ultimate cost of cowardice. While a nation like Burkina Faso stands tall, others are being led by the nose into a trap that will see their oil, their gold, and their lithium siphoned off for free under the guise of security assistance. They are being told that the Alliance of Sahel States is the enemy, when in reality, it is the only thing standing between them and total economic annihilation. Now, let us turn this story into a shared moment. Take a second right here to tell us where you're watching from. Type the name of your city, your land, the soil beneath your feet. And as you do, know this: Sankara's echo sends you not just thanks, but a blessing, for strength in your hands, for pride in your heart, for light on the road ahead. The comments below become a map of connection, showing that this message reaches far beyond borders. The Empire's strategy is a desperate attempt to recreate the tragedy of Libya across the entire West African coast. They see Nigeria as the next major prize, a territory so rich in oil that its capture would fuel their global dominance for another generation. They have already sworn that Africans have no right to trade with the Chinese, the Russians, or any power that offers a fair price for the harvest. Their mission is brutal and simple. Every strategic resource, every gram of raw material in Africa must go only to the imperialist countries. They will push Africans to slaughter each other if it means ensuring no other power can do business on this soil. They send their mercenaries to cause damage, and then they offer you the very weapons they are selling to both sides of the conflict. It is a rigged game where the only way to win is to refuse to play. We must look back at our history to understand the gravity of this moment. Before the arrival of these saviors, our countries were not begging. We were not throwing ourselves into the sea out of a desperate need to escape our own homes. Our ancestors governed with a dignity that current pseudo-diplomats have long forgotten. The claim that we need external masters to manage our affairs is a lie that only holds up if we remain divided. The empire is strong only because some Africans show themselves to be weak, convinced that terrorism is a localized problem of the Sahel rather than a continental mission of recolonization. The pressure is mounting. The sleeper cells of instability are being woken up in Central Africa and beyond. The global powers are terrified that the spirit of Ibrahim Traore will ignite a flame that they cannot extinguish with their bombs or their media manipulation. They are doubling down on their military presence in Nigeria, using every false pretext to open permanent bases. But the light of truth is beginning to pierce through the smoke. People are starting to ask why they should fund their own destruction. As the architects of the old world scramble to lock the gates, they are finding that the keys have already been reclaimed by those who tend the soil. The final confrontation is not between armies, but between the lie of dependency and the truth of independence. The phantom warnings of an 8,000-kilometer threat and the manufactured panic over school safety in Nigeria are not just isolated lies. They are the final gasps of a dying era of manipulation. When we peel back the layers of this geopolitical theater, we see a machine that is terrified of a continent that has finally begun to wake up. They claim to offer protection, but the only thing they are protecting is their own access to the second largest oil reserve in Africa. The people of Nigeria, Benin, and the surrounding nations are being told that their safety depends on the presence of foreign boots, yet history proves that those boots only lead to the extraction of wealth and the erosion of dignity. The mercenary loop is a cycle that can only be broken by those who are brave enough to stand on their own soil and refuse to be pawns in a game played for the benefit of distant capitals. We are witnessing a historic collision between two worlds. One world is built on the old, crumbling pillars of dependency, where 85% of resources are signed away for the illusion of peace. The other world is being built right now in the heart of the Sahel, where the Alliance of Sahel States has declared that the era of begging is over. The global powers are desperate to wake up their sleeper cells and wake up the ghosts of colonization, because they know that if the alliance succeeds, the entire continent will realize that the saviors were never necessary. The strength of Africa has always resided in the voices of its people, in the calloused hands of its farmers, and in the unyielding spirit of those who refuse to throw themselves into the ocean in search of a future that belongs to them right here. What you have witnessed today is not a conclusion, but an opening. Africa's story of pride and independence is still being written, and each voice that joins makes the chorus stronger. Subscribe now, not as a favor, but as a commitment to follow this journey, because the next video will not just continue the story, it may reshape how you see the world. Do not let this moment pass into silence. Subscribe and stand ready for the chapter that comes after this one. The road ahead is difficult, but the light of sovereignty is now too bright to be extinguished by media manipulation or manufactured terror. Every time a pseudo-diplomat attempts to sell the harvest of the nation for personal gain, the people must remember the example of those who chose the road of dignity. The struggle for West Africa is the struggle for the heart of the world, a fight to ensure that the wealth of the land serves the people of the land. We have seen the lies, we have calculated the distances, and we have identified the mercenaries. The machine is exposed, and its power is fading because the people have decided to become ungovernable by anything other than their own truth. The era of manufactured dependency is reaching its inevitable end, giving way to a new dawn where the soil and the soul are finally reunited. In this monumental shift, the unwavering vision and leadership of Ibrahim Traore serve as a powerful reminder that an African nation can indeed forge its own path without external permission. The success of Burkina Faso in reclaiming its territory and its dignity has provided a blueprint for the entire continent to follow. As the old empires scramble to maintain their grip, they find that they can no longer suppress the spirit of Ibrahim Traore, which has ignited a flame of independence that will burn until every strategic resource is back in the hands of its rightful owners.